science and technology. Um, just it's a humbling experience for me to be here in front of so many scientists. But to give you just a brief perspective as to why this policy was required, as you all know, 1958, then 83, then 2003, and now 2013. Uh, Several policies on science and technology have been developed in this country and with different objectives. The first one was basically a document of intent. The second one was basically on how we can have self-reliance in terms of technology. Uh, the 2003 one, how we can increase funding for R&D. But we never really had a concerted effort to have science and technology contribute to the actual GDP of the country. So this present policy is basically geared, I mean, even though it's written in a way which may not be very evident, but the key understanding is that what we want is that these three things come together and actually helps us in having greater economic growth. Uh, this is how we have come about. 1958, 83, 2003, and 2013, and these were basically the objectives which I was talking about. Uh, and this is in a way what we want to achieve through this policy. Uh, the idea is that probably we are doing some basic work, basic research, and some technology development in isolation, and some company which may be located somewhere else on the globe may be getting benefit from our research. So the idea is to link up our R&D institutions, encourage our private sector, encourage our companies to team up with our labs and get the benefit of that research and translate that into tangible products and services. So that's what the objective is. And you will see, if you have read the document, you will see that in many instances it talks about collaboration, it talks about increasing private sector R&D investments, it talks about hand holding with private sector. In many cases it talks about venture capital, it talks about greater integration of the industry with academia and laboratories. So basically the idea is that now we are self-confident, now we have a S&T infrastructure in this country. How can we leverage that S&T infrastructure for greater growth of the economy? So this is what I'm talking about. Instead of having science, technology, and innovation in isolation, why not have it together, bring in industry, bring in academia, bring in the laboratories, and do something which will result in tangible products and services. I mean, sitting here in ICRISAT, this is all very well known because agricultural scientists, agricultural research in this country is one of the most productive research that happens. But that cannot be said about the other sciences or about the other technology developments that goes on. So the idea is to integrate these three and get some value out of it. The idea also is to promote high quality research in the country, to bring in gender parity, to bring in greater focus, uh, like the policy document talks about identifying 10 sectors in which we are doing well. And then can we have some kind of a focused approach to promote those 10 sectors? See, if we don't have focus, then we will not be able to get the best bang for the buck. So the idea is to get the best bang for the buck, identify those 10 sectors where India has some kind of core competence, give it a dose of S&T, and see, let's see if things improve. So the idea is to have competitive advantage, value creation, increasing global competitiveness, and also having inclusive growth. That's also one of the key elements of this policy, which I kind of missed out. The idea is also to have, growth, but moderated growth which takes everybody along, and the policy has to be seen in light of the other things that are happening around us. Like recently, the National Innovation Foundation, they have started a 5,000 crore fund to fund innovations at the bottom of the pyramid. So the policy has to be seen in the context of what is happening in the rest of the economy, the rest of the policy intentions of the government. So the idea is not just to promote large companies and their R&D efforts, but also to bring in innovations at the bottom of the pyramid, supported by our S&T institutions, supported by our academy. These are the features, the main features: capturing aspirations, evidence-based investments, promoting excellence and relevance, having a national agenda for S&T system, attracting private sector investment into R&D, and delivery systems for S&T outputs, changing ecosystem for S&T. That's where all the venture capital, the talk about all the venture capital and bringing in the bottom of the pyramid thing comes in. In terms of capturing aspirations, the idea is to have a greater buy-in from the community and give greater scope and opportunities to people to excel in whatever they're doing. In evidence-based investments, as I was saying, can we have a focused approach? Can we have an approach in which we identify certain sectors, like let's say automobiles? Not many people in this country are thinking about supporting the automobile sector from a S&T perspective. But if you look at the investment of R&D in these sectors, we all talk about drugs and pharma. When we talk about private sector R&D investment, we know that drugs and pharma industry invests a lot on R&D. But our analysis for the last 16 years has shown that there are certain other promising sectors other than just drugs and pharma, where if the government invests a little bit of money, ties the knots together, brings a set of S&T institutions and works with the industry, probably there is greater scope for improvement. Increasing global share of publications in terms of volume is also an objective, which I have already talked about. And increasing the manpower in the entire S&T sector is also an objective. These are the issues for promoting excellence and relevance, which I have already touched upon. So there is going to be a set of implementation guidelines to bring in how the new postdocs or the new PhDs who are coming out, how they can be absorbed into the system, and how greater leverage can be extracted from the new crop of people that are coming out. Of course, there are quality issues as well, which needs to be addressed and which the policy implementation plan, will address. Gender parity is also a very, very interesting and important aspect of this policy, because there's a lot has been said about gender parity in S&T in India. Whole section has been devoted on greater institution, academia, industry partnership. Earlier we used to talk about institute industry partnership or academia industry partnership, but probably for the first time we are thinking of having all the three together and having an institutionalized mechanism, not just for placement of people or not just for doing project work, but actually coming together and doing collaborative research. I think this thing has come into the policy, having seen the Israeli experience of their magnetron program, which was exceedingly successful. So this aspect probably has been taken from that country. Collaborate internationally in mega science projects, which is already continuing and will continue in the future. Position performance linked reward systems, which everybody has been talking right from the Sixth Pay Commission itself, but no concrete plans has been formulated. So the policy talks about this thing, and probably the implementation plan will have some concrete proposals on it. National agenda and STI system balancing between supply side interventions and demand based interventions, meaning that probably the departments will not just be measured on how much money they spend, or they are able to, whether they are able to exhaust their budget, but also what kind of outputs and outcomes they are able to generate. I was talking about planned intervention in 10 select sectors, a holistic approach, an alignment with National Innovation Council, aligning STI with R&D for agriculture, manufacturing, where the real employment generation is. Agriculture still is about 52% of the people in this country are in agriculture, and probably a lot more needs to be done there. Climate change, of course, yes, that's also mentioned. The key takeaway in this policy is how to engage with the private sector, and several things have been said in the policy document about engaging with private sector. The most important of which is this PPP model. Whole sections have been written about how this PPP model can be brought about, and international experience has been studied, and after which it has been brought into this document. The idea is to whether the risk of research can be shared. I mean, private sector is very keen when it comes to sharing the outcomes of research, but research means there is a probability of success and there is a probability of failure. I mean, the system is like that. I mean, nobody can say when he starts a research project that it will be a success. So there is an element of risk involved. And the idea is whether private sector can be cajoled, can be advised, can be coerced perhaps into sharing that risk, because the government on its own cannot keep on investing so much on R&D year on year. So the idea is that if the benefits, if the private sector is interested in getting the benefits from research, they may as well share the risks. And the idea is also that probably if private sector invests money, there will be greater buy-in from the private sector, and there will be greater accountability on part of the governmental institutions when they are spending money. So it works both ways. So the private sector also benefits, probably the government sector also benefits. And enabling multi-stakeholder party, we have been talking about it. New policy tools for grants to private sector. That's a touchy issue. That's Delhi going through whatever it's going through right now. That is going to be a touchy issue. How do you actually give funds to private sector entities, or how do you create a mechanism where a government lab or university or even an international organization and a private player comes together, and actually government money can be given to the private sector, and without fear of what happens if the entire thing bombs. So it's a challenge, and probably the implementation document will have greater clarity on it. The policy document tells us about the intent of the government, that this is what the government intends to do. Implementation will give us a plan of how it intends to achieve this. IPR policy also, the policy touches on about 2 paragraphs have been written on it, but it talks about social good and co-sharing of rights rather than IPR being some kind of monopolistic kind of tool at the hands of few. Technology business incubators have been there in this country for a long time. The idea is to promote the technology business incubators in this country have been successful. The idea is to promote what has already been successful. Incentives for green manufacturing in line with our manufacturing policy. That's in line with our manufacturing policy. I have already touched upon these. Establishment of Science State Center for Technology is a new thing which has come up, uh, kind of having strengthening the state councils. When we are talking about ecosystem, the main thing is mobility of people. I mean, in the present dispensation, people are in isolated compartments. If we are talking about collaborative research, wherein a ace scientist in chemistry can collaborate or work in a ace laboratory in, let's say, agriculture or some such discipline, we need to look at how to encourage mobility, at least within the country. There is no policy as of now, because the vertical departments like ICAR or CSIR and other such organizations which have several laboratories under them, there is a sense of watertight compartmentalization which needs to be broken to encourage greater mobility of people, which will actually feed into the collaborative efforts. Closing gaps in the innovation chain we have been talking about. Public procurement policy for backing innovations. One of the key problems of Indian science, especially if you're working with defense research, is how do you procure a pin, for example, because that will take you 6 months. So there is need for a greater clarity on what kind of procurement policy should the scientific departments adopt. Should it be like buying an helicopter, or should it be more easy to procure? Somewhere there's a question of trust also here, which probably the implementation documents will address. New auditing principles for performance. So these are the focus areas of the STI policy. Prioritize critical areas like agriculture, climate variability and change, communication, energy, environment, health, materials and water management. Probably GRISAT is into half of these agenda items. Promote interdisciplinary research. Foster use of innovations from both strategic and non-strategic sectors for research. Support innovation incubators. Establish a fund for social inclusion. The National Innovation Council, as I said, already has gone ahead and it has a fund. Probably DST will also have a separate fund when it talks about this. Leverage traditional knowledge through science, traditional medicine, things like that. Support STI driven enterprises and business models. The focus will be on SMEs. Invest into young innovators through education, training and mentoring. Launch new mechanisms for nurturing technology business incubators and science-led entrepreneurship. Support STI-driven entrepreneurship with viable and highly scalable business model, investing in young innovators and entrepreneurs through education, training and mentoring, promoting mechanisms such as small idea, small money and risk idea fund to support innovation incubators. And lastly, this is how the policy ends. In a sense, this is the goal of the policy: science research innovation system for high technology led path for India. Srishti, as the secretary keeps on mentioning. Thank you for hearing me out.